Hello, everybody. Good afternoon from a sunny Dublin, and welcome to the ECR CatMan Network Role of AI in Category Management webinar. I'm Declan Carroll, and I'm Managing Director of ECR Community. I'm delighted to bring you through today's webinar, the context of it, and then to introduce you over to our speakers today, which will be Arbor from Zenline AI and Stefan from GS1 Switzerland, and with Simon Dunn from Optima Retail moderating. Let me just bring today into a little bit of context, because today's presentation is under the auspices of the ECR CatMan Network, and this is a screenshot from our website. And we have the lofty ambition of trying to promote the global impact of category management as a collaborative strategic process. And we have started to do that this year by having a number of quarterly webinars. For instance, in March, we had a webinar hosted by Brazil that focused on the 8-step category management process. Fernanda Dalban of Dalban Supermercados and Eduardo Bezerra of Reckitt Brazil both gave presentations on how they've utilized the 8-step category management process within their operations and with trading partners. And that presentation and a recording of the webinar are available to watch on our ECR CatMan Network website. Our next webinar in this series will be on June the 11th, when it will be hosted by Italy, and we'll be sending out details on that next week. But do check the website to keep up to date with the webinars in that series. We have another quarterly webinar series, which is moderated by George Mirza. George is a retail strategy advisor in the US. And our ambition here is to keep every category management practitioner around the world up to date with the latest innovation in technology that affects category management. And we should be seeing such a huge amount of innovations as the year and the next couple of years progress. So the first webinar we had 3 exciting innovations. Angie Westbrook, who's CEO of Standard AI, showed how they can capture screen grabs of real supermarket situations by using the security cams. Tom Gahani is of Simbi Robotics, and you might have heard of them. They've got new robotics all the time that are able to monitor planogram compliance and product availability within the store. And Chris Woodbeck is from a very innovative company called Picasso that are able to take grabs of lifestyle changes according to social media activity. That was a one-hour webinar hosted by George, and it's available to rewatch at the CatMan Network website. Their next webinar will take place at the end of June, when we will have another 3 or 4 exciting new technological innovations. And this series of webinars commenced in March, when we had presentations from Google, from a professor at the University of Freiburg, and from Beth at Pernod Ricard. And I highly encourage you to rewatch this webinar. It was fantastic, and especially when you look at some of the work which Pernod Ricard are doing, how to implement AI tools to assist the category management process. Every month we also publish an expert article. So Fatima and Antonella both published articles, and last month we had Dr. Brian Harris, who, as you know, is the founder of the 8-step approach to category management, when he had an article on the evolution of category management. And for any of you involved in category management that wants to learn a little brief history about its evolution and where it lies today, and why as a process it goes to strength, it's a really great article to read. Let me just give a couple of slides from the ECR Community Annual Global Trends, which we released last month. We had 320 senior people, but 20% were CEOs, another 20% were directors, from 19 countries participate in this global survey. And I don't think I've ever come across a time when shoppers around the world and retailers and suppliers are thinking so similarly, and the results showed up year after year. But this slide is particularly important to set today into context. We asked people what the top 3 priorities were for 2026. Unsurprisingly, 64% of respondents identified improving operational efficiency as one of their top 3 priorities. However, 50% of organizations are continuing to invest in digital transformation and automation that improves supply chain visibility, of course, automates manual processes, of course, but relevant for today, enables more data-driven decision making. And I think that's what this series, when we look at incorporating AI into category management, is going to address. And when we compare the results of 2025 to 2026, you will see a massive increase in digital transformation and AI as a business priority, from 41% in 25 to 50% in 2026. It's not necessarily unsurprising, but it does show the reason why we have started this series of webinars, so that listeners can keep up to date with what we are seeing in the world and how AI is affecting category management. Look, before I move off this slide, look at where sustainability dropped in terms of being a top business priority. And this is from countries as far as Europe to China to Colombia, where 37% has dropped down to 15%. Okay, so let's get stuck in today's presentation. Here's our agenda, and here is our host, Simon Dunn. Good afternoon, Simon.
Thank you, Declan. Wonderful introduction as usual. So I'm going to moderate the call. We're going to have a presentation from Arba, who's going to show us all about AI agents, and then we're going to move into a panel discussion with Stefan Ritter from GS1. So this webinar, let me share my screen. So this webinar is brought to you by the AI and Category Management Group. So thank you to Marilyn and to Francoise, and also to Daniel at GS1, who've helped us bring this webinar in particular to you. So we're here to answer 3 questions and to help the industry sort of navigate what is a fascinating journey into the world of AI. So when we started, we had 3 key questions we wanted to try and answer across these webinars. So firstly, how will AI reshape the category management process? What new capabilities will teams need to stay future fit? How can AI better leverage big data to enable more predictive, consumer-centric and data-driven decision making across the retail value chain? And I think Arba's going to give some fantastic insights to that in a moment. And thirdly, how will AI transform collaboration between suppliers and retailers, and what new value can the category function create in an AI-driven ecosystem? So there's a lot of change here now, but also coming in the future. One of the things I do at Optima, we then asked in more detail, well, how would you describe your organization's current use of AI in each of the fields below? And it's very early days. I can't share too much data, but you can see it's being used more in terms of innovation, in terms of strategy, in terms of some of the more basic kind of category and brand performance analysis. Forecasting comes through relatively strongly. I think if you asked a forecaster, it would be higher than that. But interestingly, assortment planning, space and retail media are down the bottom end. So people haven't really got started so much with that. And Arba is going to talk to us about how we can use AI to build better assortments. So it's going to be fascinating. Before I go, if you want to see any more about the research, please just do get in touch with me or visit the website Optima Retail, and it would be great to have you involved. So Arba, I'm now going to hand over to you. I think Declan's going to do some. I'll take my screen down, and Arba will take over, and he will talk to you all about agentic AI and how it can be used to build better ranges and assortments.
Are you seeing the screen already? Perfect. Thank you, Simon. Thanks for the interesting insights on AI and category management. The goal of my goal for this session is basically that by the end of the session, every participant here understands that AI can already do things for us in category management. So it's here to already help. However, I want to go further. I want to explain that today's chatbots, AI agents, are basically first-day interns. And in order to bring them from being first-day interns to actually senior category managers or head of category, we actually need systems, enterprise systems. And this is what I'm going to speak about. Before I get started, a few words about myself and what we do at Zenline. I'm Arba. I'm the founder of Zenline AI, and we are an AI agent startup. So we basically build agents specifically for category management pricing and promotion workflows for enterprises. And before I started Zenline, I studied at ETH in Zurich. I did AI research in Cambridge. So I've been with AI on this topic for the past 8 years, basically. And afterwards, I worked for 3 years at the Boston Consulting Group with CPG companies, with retailers, where we worked on commercial excellence programs in, again, assortment pricing and promotion. So what I want to get started first with is basically a bit of history on what has happened in AI. So for the past 10 years, or before 2022, before the launch of ChatGPT in 2022, when people said AI, what they meant was machine learning. Machine learning basically always involved heavy mathematical modeling. It required very structured, cleaned data in order to get anything useful, such as, for example, predicting consumer preferences, which a lot of retailers have tried. They have spent months of projects to do this, promotion performance, category trends. All of this, again, requires a lot of structured data in order to even get started, which very often include months of exercises here. Since the launch of ChatGPT in 2022, so whenever someone, either the media, someone in the organization speaks about AI today, what they mean is conversational AI. And this type of AI mostly works with unstructured data. They can also work with structured data if you give them the right tools. However, they are very, very, very good with working with unstructured and actually also unclean data. So what does that mean? In the old world of machine learning, you had these 6 to 12-month projects even to get started. Clean structured data was a requirement, not an afterthought, and many retailers failed to implement these projects because they required ML experts, which most retailers basically just didn't have available in the team, very expensive to acquire, and again, very risky projects that often led nowhere. For example, if you want to identify changing consumer demands, you had to scrape social, clean the data, scrape newspapers, and then one newspaper magazine would write about a trend. Some other newspaper magazine would call the trend differently. And in classical machine learning, you would need to find the link between these words somehow. However, in today's AI, most of this works out of the box because the AI is just very, very, very intelligent from the get-go. So it does not need months of data cleaning, modeling, machine learning work actually to become useful, but it is useful inherently for specific category management tasks, which I will show today. So one very specific example I want to walk through today is what do shoppers actually want? We know this is for the next 10 minutes, I'll speak about this and the power of this new AI, how you can use it. So you know best how difficult it is to understand what shoppers really want, how consumer behavior and demand are changing, yet that we have to follow that. And here are a few examples of how AI can actually work to help find relevant trends in specific categories. So that can be a new matcha strawberry flavor in chocolate, that can be new brands in beauty, but there can also be blue matcha, whereas most of the CPG and retailers are now jumping on green matcha. Consumer demand has already shifted to blue matcha, and similarly also in consumer electronics with shocks, but also maybe Aloe as a yoga brand, whereas yoga itself is establishing as a sports category, which is entirely new. And the data is out there. The data is in social, it's in newspapers, it's in the web. However, it's unstructured and it was very, very hard to capture before. So what I want to demonstrate in the next few minutes is that ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini are the most impressive interns you will ever work with. And you'll hear me use the notion of first day intern very often because this is what it is and this is how you should also treat it. You have the power of an analyst every single day basically on your side. However, every single time you start a new chat, they know nothing about you. This is exactly how a first day intern would start. They know nothing about the organization. Everything that the first then intern learns throughout the 3 months to actually become better on a daily and weekly basis. This is what is missing in the AI infrastructure, because there's no organizational learning, and there's also no self-improvement memory or strategy embedded in today's tool landscape. With regards to the question whether to use ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini, it doesn't matter. You can use all of them. I just want to show one very specific example here on how to leverage them and how you can improve what is already available. So let me just switch the screens for a second. So there's layer one of, let's say, using an intern and I'm using now Claude as an example. And to use a very simplistic prompting, like for example, you're a senior category manager, conduct a trend research for lemonades and soft drinks. And what you will see, is the more often you use this prompt, you'll see that the variance of the results is very, very high, because we weren't stringent on what is the trend research? How do we define the category? What do we consider good resources? What is the market that we're looking for? We define here, but what exactly are the metrics and so on? What is the trend? For one company A can be considered a trend if something is absolutely new on social. For another company, a trend is maybe something that is already in the market for 2-3 years, because they typically have a consumer base that is much slower to react to these trends. So what you'll see is a market research report, which is basically, it's good enough. It gives quite decent information about the market, in this case, lemonades and soft drinks. However, it's quite hard to actually get action out of this because it's very generic. And the first lesson that I want to share is about prompting. Prompting can be done much more rigorous, which then helps to use the power of AI that we already have to get much more sophisticated outcomes, which I'll show, and we can also share these prompts afterwards. So instead of just saying conduct a research, trend research, what we can do is explain to the AI in very much detail how a trend analysis should be performed. So this is what you see now here. I'll walk you through the result in a second, just to show you how this prompt actually looks like. So this is, for example, a very generic prompt, which you can always substitute your category in whichever you want. And basically what it does is, instead of just saying we want a trend analysis, we say we want to do an assortment foundation analysis to understand the entire assortment and not only what is trending, which makes it easier for the AI, because whenever we say trend, it has to evaluate whether something is a trend or not. So what we do here is we define the exact steps. We define an objective, we define the steps. In the steps, we say, first, we need to discover the category. We tell it where to look, for example, e-commerce bestseller lists, retail category structures, market research reports, trade publications, everything that is publicly available. And then we also make clear that in the output, we want to have as much quantification as possible. Wherever reports mention volumes, market sizes, growth rates, trajectories, whether it's growing, stable, declining, everything should be pulled out of the report. And then we also say that for example, if we do a Europe market report or a DACH report, we want the AI in the end to split it by Germany, Switzerland, or Austria. And what you see here is that at the end, we don't only want trends in the sense of, okay, there's a particular, let's say, for example, blue matcha trending, but we actually also want to see what are the top brands that are already in this market and the top SKUs. Then we classify how does a tier look like. So we defined into 3 different tiers, as I mentioned. Instead of just saying, find me the trends, I want the AI to classify this into volume drivers. So what are, let's say, the highest absolute sales volumes? Which are the products that typically appear in the top bestsellers for different competitors? Then we can say what are the growth leaders and what are the ones where we see are emerging. And we can also give some for example, something like CAGRs that we typically see in that category, that would indicate that this is an emerging trend. We can always go deeper and deeper. And for example, say, hey, we always at the end want to cross-validate this with live bestseller lists on the top marketplaces. And here you see AI can do these things already. The only question is, do I, as a prompter, define exactly how a very good trend research actually is conducted? And then do I define what the output is of this format? If I do this and ask the same question as I did before, but instead of asking it just with one sentence, I can show the result now. The AI is able to basically give me the output, which is then obviously takes much more time, but obviously also is much longer. The AI is then able to give me this assortment foundation analysis for lemonades and soft drinks. Give me an executive summary because I told it that this is the output format that I want, the key market drivers, and then go through this tiered list of volume drivers. As you see, obviously, cola flavored carbonated drinks. It then also lists top brands in each market. It also lists top SKUs in each market. And obviously, this is without having any Nielsen or internal data. Obviously, and I'll show this in a second, you can go further and enriching it with additional data. But as you can see, it complies exactly with whatever you told it if the prompt is strict enough and explains what you want. Here now we have the growth leaders, which is the first indicator of trends. And then obviously we have the ones that are rapid growth and emerging categories. And just by doing it this way, we can then have something which is actually repeatable, do it every month, and then actually again, you say, hey, to compare the results and see what is trending this month, what didn't trend last month, and have something which is easier to process and compare on a regular basis. Again, at the end, I will share with you or show you how you can get access to the prompt, and you can reuse this in food and beverage. You can reuse this in fashion. It works everywhere. Back to the presentation. One notion that is very important. So they are the most impressive interns that you'll ever work with. However, they are first-day interns. They lack organizational understanding. They don't know anything about the strategy. So for example, they listed, as you saw, they listed a lot of trends, and maybe 30, 50 or 50% of the trends aren't even relevant for my organization because my customer segment is not interested in these trends. The first-day intern just can't know these things. And it also has a complete lack of data understanding, which columns are important, what constitutes an active product that is already in the listing, and so on. And it has no short-term or long-term memory. Long-term memory meaning products that we maybe have listed 6 months ago that didn't work and we delisted them again, but also short-term memory in the sense, what did I do last month? So I would have to, the one example that I just made, I would have to prompt the AI to give it the report of last month and say, hey, what changed this month? And all of this is manual work. And to get off something that is more ahead of category, we need a system. And a system is nothing that the AI tools build out of the box or basically have available out of the box for us. Because in this system, to get to a perfect assortment, it requires to master billions of data points outside of only trends. It would require to have transactional data. It would require to understand the master data. What does lemonade and soft drink mean for company A versus company B? All of that is in the data. However, we would need access to the or the AI would need access to the data to be able to do that. So that includes SAP, maybe some CSVs flying around, Nielsen data, or some Power BI dashboards. And on top of that, obviously, everything that you can enrich it on top with social, competitor data and news is more powerful than just doing simple web research. So, and now I want to speak a bit about how these, let's say, this platform thinking or enterprise solution can actually help to get from something that is more of a AI assists every single category manager, which is already brilliant and everyone should use it as much as possible, if the company allows, and if it is allowed to share maybe also internal data, that's always depending on every single company. However, I'm switching now to how do you build something that is actually a system so that the entire category management department changes how they work from every single category manager is just empowered to the entire department is empowered, and they share one holistic set of tools. And basically what this requires is it requires that the entire company data is prepared for the agent to be able to work with it. What do I mean by that? You can't share access to transactional databases to an agent. If you do that, the agent does 2 SQL requests and the context is full. Same for inventory data, purchase behavior, repurchase rates. Everything that is in the raw format would be something that it would take minutes or hours for the agent to actually explore. And very often it would just have too much information and couldn't process it. So then there must happen a lot of pre-preparation, the same way as the pre-preparation has been done for the past 10 years in forms of Power BI dashboards and so on, so that the agent can actually work with it. And then the second is market data, where you need much less preparation because agents can work quite well with unstructured data. But here is the same way. Instead of having the agent go on a competitor site every single day and scrape everything and get a lot of noise when it scrapes, you can do a lot of pre-processing that in the end just gives the most relevant category, mapped categories of each competitor, store all of that in one database, and then make that database accessible to agents. And on what is required there then is to make it actually useful is have some underlying strategy, company strategy, category strategy, memory that I was mentioning before, right? What happened last month? When 2-3 months ago, when we looked at the trends, did we launch anything new? All these things must be embedded in a platform, in a database, so that agents can, when they do act, actually reference the strategy and reference the memory before looking into a new trend analysis. However, when we get these things right, agents can go much further than just doing some trend research on web analytics, on public research, but actually do create what we call basically ready-made reports for decisions, so that category managers can become less of analysts, but more of decision makers, and that much, much more frequently. One last switch. How could this look like? As an example. What's important is whenever we switch into enterprise AI, this also means that flows need to be customized and built exactly for the organization to be able, or to basically make it useful for the organization. So instead of just doing one external research, we can give the agent access to, obviously, external research, but also to Google and TikTok, but also to marketplaces and to competitor data, as I just mentioned before, right? Instead of having every single time when we do a research, ask the agent to go to 10 web competitors, scrape them, do the work, which again is very, very heavy. You can do all of that programmatically, but just give the most important data then to the agent and let them do analysis, do a research consolidation of across different sources, because here in Google and in the web research and in the competitor research, we will find some things which are similar, maybe the same trend, and we don't want to have that 3 times. So we have to consolidate that. And then in the end, what the agent can do is a gap analysis compared to our own assortment, which combines then obviously the master data, financial performance data, and so on and so forth. And it doesn't stop at finding a gap, but based on specific strategically set metrics, we can say, how do we want to estimate the revenue potential of launching a new product? And this is what you would then see here, for example, with the revenue opportunity. So what I want to show here is basically AI is not only able to find you a trend, but if given the company data, if given the master data, revenue data, it can even, with a specific set of rules, even find the revenue opportunity, including net of cannibalization, and let's say historic performance of recently launched products and so on. And then obviously also have the entire methodology of how did it define a gap, what constitutes a gap, and how did the revenue estimates come about, what were the cannibalization, the sets of cannibalization that were used, and basically just create the first doc that not a junior or first day intern would do, but something that a regular category manager could do, and lift off 70, 80% of the work that a typical CatMan would do in this case. And maybe just a few numbers to also, I just mentioned that, right? 70, 80% time reduction. But if you have a already prepared document to make a decision, it's so much easier to have to do all the grunt work, which also then constitutes much faster time to market, and obviously also improved margins. I think this is very often, AI is very often thought of, how can we make departments more efficient? What we're actually seeing is the ones that are leading and that are using it fruitfully are the ones that are actually not only not thinking about efficiency in their own departments, but launching faster, improving margins, making smarter decisions, because they have access to all the analytical capability of the world, if you use agents properly. That's it. Thank you so much. If you want to receive the prompts that I was showing before, this is just my LinkedIn, connect me on LinkedIn, and then I can share it with everyone, or otherwise we can also coordinate through Simon. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Albert. It's a fascinating presentation, and I think it really just illustrates the level of change and the opportunity which we see in category management today. So I'm going to now open up the panel discussion, reintroduce Stefan Rutter, who leads the category management capability program at GS1. So Stefan, you work with category managers across the industry every day. So having just seen Arber's demonstration, what do you see as the biggest change that AI agents bring compared to the tools that category managers are using today?
Thanks, Simon, and also thanks, Albert, for the great presentation you just gave. From our perspective, the biggest change that AI is providing us is helping category managers from moving from searching for answers towards challenging recommendations. Today, basically, category managers spend a huge amount of time collecting data, building slides, cleaning up Excel files, all the things that Albert just explained to us. And in the end, connecting retailers' data, shopper data, and manufacturing data to make up their minds in terms of assortment, pricing, promotions, to a certain degree, placements, and value-added services. And yeah, AI agents will help us making all that work faster and more robust, reducing mistakes during the process. But from our perspective as GS1 Switzerland, as we are also preparing an academic program on category management and AI, the real value is not speed. It is cross-category thinking. AI can spot patterns of shoppers' behavior that humans, as category managers or buyers, or for that matter, also key account managers of big companies, often miss because they are too focused on their own category. For example, if you have a category like bars, cereal bars, fruit bars, and stuff, and you see that shoppers over the last, let's say, 2 or 3 years moved away from nut-based, fruity-based parts towards protein. That could have been a good indication also for yogurts or dairy drinks or for dairy snacks, for instance. So all the chilled categories where we saw quite a ramp up of protein consumption. And that was predictable 3 years ago when we saw the first change in this next category. Maybe we can show some slides later on where we believe that there is a fundamental shift of how categories are being set up in the past by what a product looks like towards what a shopper is actually looking for. So AI can free up time of category managers to have a more strategic approach on understanding changes of shopper behavior, changes of new need structures as are building up, and changes in the category decision tree so that they can challenge either what manufacturing partners provide them with or challenge what their own perception of the past was on their own category. So I believe that's the biggest change that AI agents will bring to the profession.
Yeah, and it's just fascinating. I mean, I've been a category manager for a long time, and I think when you look at it, there's a real bottleneck, I think, in terms of the amount of analysis that can be done by any one human, and they can't, a human, it finds it very difficult to synthesize across all of that data, even at all, never mind as quickly as AI can do it. So I think it kind of moves the challenge for the business. It's like the time taken to do the analytics and the power of the analytics is no longer the challenge. It's the ability for the business to kind of digest it and form a strategy on the back of it. So I have another question for you, Stefan, actually about the data. So I think a lot of people, and this came through in our research as well, a lot of people may have, after seeing this data, is what is safe to share with an AI tool and what is not. So what are the key rules organizations should be following in your view when it comes to sharing their data with AI, and who should be making those decisions?
So listen, we have a clear view on that based on the Swiss environment that we are operating in as GS1 Switzerland. We treat AI like an external business partner unless a company approves a different approach. That means organizations need to be very clear about the rules, what is public, what is internal, what is confidential, and what is highly sensitive data. So for instance, retailer-specific conditions, pricing agreements, future promotions, so those that you don't want to communicate so that your, let's say, competitors or market followers are not knowing what you're going to do. All these kinds of data should be treated such as personal data, which is legally protected. So you need to make sure that whatever you share with the AI, whether it's a closed environment or an open environment, follows your internal classification of how you should treat the data. The second most important thing that we believe is relevant here is that it's not simply an IT decision. AI governance needs to be driven by top managers, so business drivers, legal, IT, but also operations. Everyone should be put in a collaborative decision-making mode to define what kind of data, internal data or shared data from partners can be shared with an AI agent or an AI system so that we can draw meaningful conclusions out of that data with the help of AI. And one surprising insight, I think in many companies, the bigger risk is actually not sharing of data with an AI system rather than not sharing enough data. Teams become so afraid these days about negative or positively negative consequences of sharing too much data that they're keeping them too close, too hidden, too sealed, and essentially making it impossible for retailers and suppliers to draw meaningful conclusions out of the data. So we would take a very positive view, saying let's enable teams to understand what kind of data can be shared, and then have a very aggressive, open sharing approach to the new AI world. We believe that this will help definitely to drive the profession to a new level.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great perspective. And so, I mean, what I take from what you're saying there is like training is key. Like people need to understand, like throughout the organization, what we're looking at and how the organization should respond. And also, a lot of the stuff I kind of talk about is you need to get started. Like you can't not get started. So, and there's so many different ways to start. I think you don't necessarily have to share massive amounts of data in one go. Like the business and the organization needs to learn how to start using the tools, and then that, I think, hopefully will generate benefits that will then validate the use case to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's there's so much opportunity. So Arba, I have a question for you, and this was, like, we had a conversation last week, and I asked you this last week, but I think it'd be good to sort of discuss it with everyone on the call. So not everyone using these tools will have deep category expertise, and there's a real risk that some people may simply accept what an AI recommends without knowing when to push back. So what would you, in your experience, what would you say would be the checks and balances that need to be in place to make sure AI outputs are properly reviewed and not just accepted? So where does the human become key to sort of guiding the AI, I guess?
I think at the very beginning, when ChatGPT came out, the Boston Consulting Group was one of the earliest adopters, and they were also very, very, very much afraid of understanding how to deal with having AI as an analyst, as a resource. And I think what most organizations within the next 12 to 24 months understood is that you need basically the exact same governance as before, which is humans are always responsible for every single decision that is made in the business. And accountability always lies with humans. There should never be, let's say, except for, I mean, there are workflows, like, for example, pricing workflows, where you put the AI in the seat of making autonomous decisions. Those are the ones where you do that, and you monitor them rigorously, and there's people sitting on top of them. But otherwise, especially in assortment, all of the decisions are supported by AI, but not made by AI, not autonomously made. So in the end, we're seeing teams perform best where the sentence, "Oh, this was suggested by AI," is never mentioned, because in the end they always approve it, and it basically religiously question everything that comes out. And I think, and this is, Simon, one of the points that we also discussed, and I think it's very important, as people start using the tools, as they see the pitfalls, and this is maybe also one of the key learnings here, that in the first 4 to 6 weeks, there will be a lot of a very steep learning curve on understanding what are very common areas where the AI typically fails. This might be on specific numbers. This might be on understanding a specific part of the data set, like what is active in the assortment, what is not active, because it still hasn't understood thoroughly the structure of the master data. But basically these two things: training on understanding where does AI fail, looking quickly for these common pitfalls whenever there is an output generated. And then number one, which is always the most important thing, it's the same everywhere. It's the same in the development world. It's the same in category management and pricing. The human must have the full accountability for whatever is happening in each category.
Thank you, Albert. And I'm going to ask you a new question here, actually, Stefan, but hopefully it'll be okay. So my reflection is that a lot of this technology will drive a lot of efficiency, and it will save a lot of time, and it will unlock a lot of opportunity for businesses. But the type of work that it's replacing or kind of moving into is the type of work that a junior category manager might have done. So I suppose my question to you, Stefan, is the kind of people who need to be challenging the AI back are like probably more senior, more experienced category managers. How do you see businesses being able to sort of sustain that capability in an organization where there's less people coming through who've kind of learnt the basics by doing that basic analysis?
Yeah, Simon, we as GS1 Switzerland, when it comes to category management, we have a very optimistic approach to AI and category management. We don't believe that thanks to a new toolkit that helps us all to become more effective to the right things and more efficient to do the things right, means that we have less category managers or only an elite class of category managers that can strategically challenge the outcomes of AI. We believe that there is a very complex and ever-increasing need for proper category management to be done, be executed, and be controlled. So what does it mean? Right now, most of the retailers in FMCG, CPG, but also in durables, they have a very limited set of KPIs that they use in order to list products, delist products, to consider them for promotions, do price adjustments, and to challenge placements that they have in some instances for more than a decade. So AI will help us now to combine the historic view and the limited KPIs that they used with additional new KPIs. And yes, it might come from a whole new generation of young professionals that enter the whole sphere with a complete different understanding on where to extract data and what kind of data are relevant for decision-making category management. So people like myself, we would look at the data from the cashier tills. So how many products are being sold at what price? What is the prop sales? The promotional prop sales. The young professionals would more look like, okay, what do people joining Hyrox buy in their basket when they register for an Hyrox event? What kind of durables or consumables they already purchase when they make the decision on joining one of the most trending global sports events from Brazil to China, including Berlin that I visited these days. So I think that upcoming new young professionals will just help us adding more complexity that, thanks to AI, we're able to process and to integrate into a system that helps us making better decisions. In the end, Simon, we need to understand one thing. AI helps us to be faster. But we need to make the decision in which direction we want to go. So the strategy needs to come first, needs to be clear. Priorities needs to be laid out. Otherwise, we go full throttle into the wrong direction. So priorities: should we drive margin? Should we drive sales volume? Should we drive sales value? These are the questions that still is a human activity or as a human part of the whole process. And then AI helps us just doing it faster than before.
No, thank you. And like just building on that, Arber, I'm going off script a little bit, but I think it's all right.
I would love to add something, yeah.
What's your perspective? Because for AI to work well, like the strategy needs to be codified and written down, I think, from my experience, in more detail than it typically is in organizations. How do you, like you're doing this every day, how do you kind of ensure that's happened? Or what maybe give us a sort of simple rule to try and give the clarity that AI needs to do its job.
Sure. Before I do that, I would just love to second what Stefan said, which is so important, especially in the current, let's say, environment where everyone is trying to make everyone afraid about AI, and no one knows how bad AI will be and so on for job layoffs. But in most of the industries where analytical rigor is made more accessible, like, for example, financial industry, consulting industry in the last 20 years, the number 2x, 3x, 4x in the number of analysts that you actually hired upon that. So as soon as you make something that's very complex, like category management, more accessible and easier because of the tool set, as Stefan said, typically the number of category managers, because of how much of the work that wasn't done before is now done actually properly. And we know it, right? 10% of the assortment is properly managed, 90% is just lying there. You can do so much more, which increases profitability and then gives more reason to hire more category managers. So we personally believe that this will actually lead to a flourishing of that. On the strategy question, yes, absolutely. You cannot codify, you cannot use a machine. I mean, basically what I was also showing, right? The more the more descriptive the process of doing something, like, for example, how to do a trend research, the more you make things explicit, the easier it is for the AI to follow instead of figuring out stuff that you want it to do. Which means, specifically for strategy, which in categories typically lies in the heads of some head of category, senior category manager, and then it is tacitly living in the organization. What we have learned is that within the first 2 to 4 weeks, you need a workshop where you try to embed as much of the strategy as possible. However, knowing that there's still a lot of tacit knowledge that even the humans don't know, but whenever they make a decision, they still use that knowledge to make the decision. And this is where systems like AI can also be used to make the explicit strategy much stronger. What does it mean? What we work with is a memory layer that whenever a category manager, for example, rejects a recommendation of introducing a new variant or a new SKU, we would then, at the end of the day, go across all the interactions that all the category managers had, all the rejections, all the acceptance in month May, and implicitly, or basically try to get the implicit out and make it explicit. So why were so many variant launches rejected? And this then improves and strengthens the strategy to make it something which is actually closer to the truth than just something that is, let's say, the spoken truth. Because what we have learned is, again, if you would force everyone to write it down, what's written down is not what they want the business to be run on. So it takes a few weeks of iterations and recommendations to see what they actually want for their business.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying, it makes it live and breathe, doesn't it? Go on.
Simon, let me add on what Albert just said. As category management becomes more professional thanks to AI, retailers becoming more demanding of how suppliers should present themselves. This is exactly what we see now that we're preparing for the first academic program in category management in AI together with the University of Fribourg here in Switzerland. We will do a CS, a Certificate of Advanced Studies, and we seek a significant interest of FMCG manufacturers to train their staff, their individuals in using AI for category management to better speak the future language of category management of retailers based on AI. So we believe that with AI in the hands of the retailers, that will drive additional job prospects also for manufacturing partners in food, in near food, in non-food, all kinds of non-food, from do-it-yourself over fashion to electronics, books, whatever it is. As retailers become more capable of processing a huge chunk of data, they demand a different approach to category management or sales from the manufacturing partners. So we are quite optimistic when it comes to job prospects in category management based on sound AI skills.
No, absolutely. And my reflection, probably just to close, because I can see we're running out of time, is when I first started doing category management, it was the first wave. So Brian Harris and sort of TPG and all of the sort of retailers, the big manufacturers were getting trained in base category management principles 25, 30 years ago. And by leveraging the data in a new way, it was unlocking double-digit returns easily across range reviews. And it just feels to me like we're at that stage again. Like although we thought back at the time we were kind of leveraging the data, and I think AI is going to enable us to just go deeper, as you said earlier, Stefan, like read across different categories, different social trends, and that the level of growth that can drive and unlock is, I think, is transformational. So it's we all need to get started. Thank you very much, Albert and Stefan. Albert, for your presentation, both of you for joining and contributing really positively to the panel. Questions, as ever, we've probably got more questions than we can answer in the time, but that's why we're running a series of webinars. So you'll need to come back for the next one. And if anyone does have any questions, please just do reach out to Stefan, Albert, or myself, and we'd be happy to pick up after the call. With that, I'll hand back to Declan, who will close the session.
Thanks, Simon, Stefan, Arbor. I mean, words that are coming up like governance, setup, structure, authenticity, trust of output, training, AI strategy. It shows what an early stage we're at, and for me, underlines the need for these debates and these panel discussions. There's no way any one of us, any retailer, supplier, or even any country or marketplace can think they can keep up without being exposed to global thinking, global innovation, global technology. And I think this is a good forum for us to do that. We'd over 90 people that were online throughout the whole webinar. So look, I've sent a message in chat. Please do let us know if there's any topics or presenters you'd like to hear from, and Simon, Francoise, Marilyn will give that due consideration. We're planning 2 more webinars in AI later on this year. We're planning 2 more webinars on the 8-step process to category management. The next one will be hosted by Italy on June the 11th. And we're planning 2 more webinars on tools and technology, which we separated from AI. And the next one will take place on June the 30th. Okay, so thanks everyone. Keep in touch with our CatMan Network website for updates. And there's no silly questions here. There's no question that doesn't make sense. We're at such an early stage. Every single question makes sense at the moment, and every single topic merits respect. Thanks, Simon, Stefan, Arber. Thank you, everyone, and take care.